They said your uncle died with nothing. Just an old lodge buried under 6 feet of snow and a lifetime of bad decisions. But Ethan Caldwell didn't answer. He just stood there with the cold pressing into his lungs, keys heavy in his palm. While the townsfolk chuckled behind him like the past had already decided his future, the road up the mountain was narrow and quiet, tire tracks fading fast under fresh snowfall. And beside him sat Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd whose ears twitched at things no man could hear. The lodge appeared slowly through the white haze, half hidden against the ridge like it had been trying to disappear for years, its windows dark, its wood weathered, but not broken, not forgotten, not entirely. Ethan stepped out, boots sinking inches into the powder, the air sharp enough to sting, and for a moment, nothing moved, no wind, no sound, just the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. Rex didn't follow right away. He remained by the truck, staring, head slightly tilted, as if listening to something beneath the earth itself. Ethan noticed it then, the way the snow near the foundation lay uneven, thinner in one spot, untouched by the drifting wind, like something below was keeping it warm. "You hear that, boy?" he muttered, though there was nothing to hear. Not yet. Rex finally stepped forward, slow, deliberate, each paw placed with care, his nose lifting, nostrils flaring. And then he stopped at the base of the lodge, paw resting against the frozen ground, still as stone. Waiting, Ethan moved closer, his breath fogging the air, his gloved hand brushing against the wooden wall. And that's when he felt it. Faint, steady, a vibration so subtle it could have been his imagination, but it wasn't random. It came again, after a pause, measured, deliberate, like something counting time beneath the surface. Rex tapped his paw once, then again, matching the rhythm perfectly. And in that moment, Ethan realized something the town never could. This place wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. The vibration came again, steady and low. And this time Ethan did not pull his hand away. He pressed his palm harder against the wall as if trying to feel through the wood into whatever lived beneath it, counting without meaning 2, 1, 2, 3, until the faint tremor returned in the exact same rhythm. Rex shifted beside him and let out a quiet breath. Not fear, not warning, something closer to recognition. The kind of sound that came when a dog understood before a man ever could. Snow drifted softly around them, but that one patch near the foundation remained thin, untouched, as if the earth itself refused to freeze there. Ethan crouched and brushed the powder aside with his glove, revealing darker ground beneath, damp, warmer than it should have been in a place where the temperature barely climbed above 20 degrees. Rex stepped forward immediately and placed his paw on that exact spot, then tapped twice, paused, and tapped again, matching the pulse beneath the surface with uncanny precision. Ethan felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from the strange certainty that this was no accident, that this place had a pattern, a memory, a language of its own. He reached into the back of the truck and grabbed a rusted shovel, the metal ringing softly in the quiet air, each strike into the ground, sounding louder than it should, echoing in a way that did not belong to open land. After only a few inches the blade struck something solid, not rock, not frozen soil, but metal, a dull, hollow note that carried deeper than expected. Ethan cleared the rest with his hands, revealing a narrow plate buried flush with the earth, edges worn but still intact. A small circular indentation sat in the center, no handle, no lock, just a shape that seemed to wait for the right movement. The vibration came again beneath his fingers, and Rex tapped the plate once, twice, then rested his paw there, holding it steady. Ethan watched closely, heart beating slower now, calmer, as if whatever lay below demanded patience instead of force. He mirrored the dog without thinking, pressing his hand down in the same rhythm. Once, twice, pause, then again, and for a moment nothing happened. The world held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pull back from the mountain. Then a soft click broke the silence, so quiet it might have been missed by anyone who was not listening for it. The plate shifted slightly under his palm, not opening, just acknowledging, as if something deep below had heard them, had been waiting, and had finally decided to answer. The plate shifted again beneath Ethan's hand, not opening fully but loosening, just enough to reveal a thin seam in the frozen ground, and a faint breath of warmer air rose from below, carrying with it a scent that did not belong to winter, something metallic and old, like time sealed away. Rex lowered his head immediately, nose hovering over the opening, ears high and forward, his body still except for the slow movement of his chest, as if he was listening not just with his ears, but with something deeper. Ethan brushed away the remaining snow and wedged his fingers into the narrow edge, pulling gently at first, then with steady pressure. The metal plate gave way with a quiet groan, pivoting upward just enough to expose a dark cavity beneath, not wide, not deep at first glance, but unmistakably man-made, a narrow shaft lined with aged steel, descending into shadow that seemed to swallow the light. Ethan paused, his breath hanging in the cold air, every instinct telling him to step back, to question, to leave it buried like it had been for decades, but Rex did not move away. Instead, he placed one paw on the edge and looked down, then back at Ethan, eyes steady, certain, the kind of look that had once guided him through chaos without hesitation. Ethan exhaled slowly and reached into the truck for a flashlight, its beam cutting a clean line through the dimness as he aimed it into the opening. The light revealed a ladder, narrow and rusted but intact, descending at least 10, maybe 15 feet before fading into darkness. The walls were reinforced, not natural, not random. Someone had built this with purpose, with intention, long before the lodge above had fallen into silence. The vibration came again, softer now, deeper, as if it had shifted closer, responding to their presence. Ethan felt it through the metal beneath his boots, a subtle pulse that matched the rhythm they had followed. Rex tapped once on the edge, then stepped back, giving space. As if he understood what came next belonged to Ethan alone. The cold seemed to retreat from the opening, replaced by a steady, almost comforting warmth rising from below. Unnatural in the middle of a mountain buried under snow, Ethan gripped the ladder, testing its strength. The metal held, solid despite its age. He glanced once more at the world behind him, the empty road, the silent trees, the lodge standing like a witness to something long forgotten. Then he began his descent, each step echoing softly against the steel walls, the light from above fading quickly as he moved deeper, the air changing with every foot, warmer, thicker, carrying a faint hum that settled into his chest like a distant memory. Halfway down he stopped, listening. The sound was clearer now, not just a vibration but a pattern, deliberate, controlled, like something still functioning after all these years. Something waiting not to be found, but to be understood. And above him, Rex remained at the edge, watching, unmoving, as if guarding the threshold between what was known and what had been hidden for far too long. The ladder ended on a solid floor with a quiet metallic echo, and when Ethan's boots touched down, the sound carried farther than it should have, stretching into the darkness as if the space around him was larger than the narrow shaft had suggested. He raised the flashlight slowly, the beam cutting through a low mist that hovered just above the ground, thin and almost alive, revealing walls lined with reinforced steel and aged timber, not decayed, not abandoned, but preserved in a way that felt deliberate, as if someone had maintained this place long after the world above had forgotten it. The air was warm, nearly 50 degrees, a stark contrast to the freezing mountain outside, and beneath that warmth was the hum, steady and measured, no longer faint but present, surrounding him like a quiet engine that never stopped. Ethan turned in a slow circle, taking it in. The space opened into a chamber about 20 feet across, the ceiling supported by thick beams that showed no signs of rot. Along the walls were shelves, old but carefully arranged, holding tools, sealed crates, and objects wrapped in cloth that had not gathered dust the way they should have, as if time had moved differently here. He stepped forward, each movement cautious but drawn by something deeper than curiosity, something that felt almost like recognition. The hum pulsed again, and this time the floor beneath him responded, a soft vibration that traveled through his boots and up into his chest, matching the rhythm he had felt above, matching the pattern Rex had tapped without hesitation. Ethan followed the sound to the center of the room, where a large metal structure stood, waist-high, rectangular, its surface smooth but marked with faint grooves that formed a pattern too precise to be random. He brushed his hand across it, and the metal was warm, not heated by machinery alone, but by something sustained, something constant, The flashlight beam flickered slightly, as if reacting to the field around it. And for a moment the chamber seemed to breathe, expanding and settling in a slow, unseen rhythm. Ethan placed both hands on the surface, feeling the pulse. Directly now, steady, patient, alive in a way that defied explanation. Above him, faintly, he could hear Rex shift at the opening. A single soft movement that carried down through the shaft, grounding him, reminding him he was not alone in this moment. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, listening not just with his ears, but with the quiet part of himself that had learned to trust patterns over noise. And then he noticed it. A sequence etched into the metal, subtle but intentional, a repetition that mirrored the rhythm they had followed. Once, twice, pause. Then again, he lifted one hand and tapped the surface lightly, matching it. Once, twice, pause, and the hum deepened instantly, the air growing heavier, the light dimming for a fraction of a second before stabilizing. The structure responded, not opening, not yet, but acknowledging, like a lock that had just recognized the correct key. And in that moment Ethan understood something that no one in the town had ever seen. This was never just a hidden space. It was a system, built with purpose, waiting not for force, not for chance, but for someone willing to listen long enough to understand it. The structure remained still for a moment after Ethan matched the rhythm. But the hum beneath his hands deepened, not louder, but fuller, like something awakening rather than starting. The air shifted around him, carrying a faint warmth that seemed to rise from within the metal itself, and then slowly, almost reluctantly, a thin seam appeared along the top surface, so precise it could have been invisible seconds before. Ethan stepped back instinctively, the beam of his flashlight steady, but his breath slower now, controlled, as if he understood that rushing would only break whatever fragile trust this place required. The seam widened just enough to reveal a soft glow from within, not harsh, not artificial, but steady and calm, like light filtered through time itself. Rex let out a single low sound from above, not a bark, but a quiet acknowledgement, and Ethan felt it, that same certainty moving through him again. He knelt beside the structure and gently lifted the lid. The hinges moved without resistance, smooth despite the years, as if they had never stopped working. Inside was not what he expected, no scattered gold, no chaotic pile of wealth, but something far more deliberate, rows of sealed containers, carefully arranged, each marked with small engraved plates, dates, initials, symbols that hinted at a system far larger than this single room. Ethan reached for one and opened it slowly. Inside were gold coins, old but untouched, their surfaces catching the soft light in a way that felt almost quiet, as if even their value did not need to announce itself. He closed it again and looked deeper. Another container held documents, tightly preserved, maps, records, lines drawn across regions and years that suggested planning, movement, intention. This was not hidden wealth. This was protected wealth, meant to be found only by someone who could understand the pattern, the patience, the silence. The hum pulsed again beneath the chamber, and this time Ethan noticed something he had missed before. The rhythm was not just repeating, it was responding, changing slightly with each interaction, adapting, like a system that recognized presence, not just touch. He placed his hand back on the edge of the structure, steady, grounded, and for the first time since arriving, a memory surfaced, not loud, not overwhelming, but clear, his uncle's voice from years ago, quiet and measured, saying that some things were never lost, only hidden until the right person was ready to see them. Ethan exhaled slowly, the words settling into the space around him, into the hum, into the warmth, and above. The faint outline of the opening remained, Rex still watching, still listening, as if he had known all along that this was never about finding something buried, but about proving that someone was willing to listen long enough to uncover what had been waiting beneath the surface all this time. The chamber grew quieter as Ethan stood there, the open container in his hands, the soft glow reflecting in his eyes, and for the first time he realized the silence was not empty. It was complete, like a place that had already said everything it needed to say long before he arrived. He moved slowly along the rows, brushing his fingers across the engraved plates, each one carrying a date, some stretching back decades, others more recent, none random, all part of something measured and intentional. The hum beneath his feet continued, steady but shifting slightly as he moved, as if tracking him, responding not just to presence, but to understanding. He stopped at a larger case set apart from the others. Its surface marked with his uncle's initials, faint but unmistakable. Ethan hesitated before opening it, his breath slowing. The air around him warmer now, almost steady at 60 degrees, a strange comfort in the middle of a mountain buried in snow. When he finally lifted the lid, there was no gold inside, no documents, just a single envelope, thick, sealed, resting at the center as if it had been placed there with care rather than stored. Ethan picked it up, the paper firm despite its age, his name written across the front in a handwriting he had not seen in years, steady, deliberate, familiar. He stood still for a long moment, listening to the quiet rhythm of the chamber, the soft hum, the distant shift of Rex above, everything aligning into a single moment that felt less like discovery and more like arrival. He opened the envelope carefully, unfolding the letter inside, the words simple, direct, as if they had been waiting for him longer than he realized. It spoke of patience, of listening, of how the world often dismissed what it did not understand, and how value was not always meant to be seen immediately. His uncle had written about the system, not as a machine, but as a safeguard, something built to protect what mattered until someone came who would not force it open, but would take the time to learn its rhythm. Ethan lowered the letter slightly, the meaning settling deeper than the words themselves. This was never about the fortune alone. It was about trust, about being chosen not by chance but by character. The hum pulsed again, softer now, almost like a quiet approval, and above, Rex let out a single calm breath, the kind that came when a long journey finally made sense. Ethan folded the letter and held it close for a moment, then looked back at the rows of containers, the chamber, the structure that had waited through years of silence. And he understood something with a clarity that did not need explanation. Nothing here had been hidden from the world. It had been hidden for the right person, and somehow, without knowing when or how, that person had become him. The letter remained steady in Ethan's hands, its weight far greater than the paper itself. And for a long moment he did not move. He simply listened, to the hum beneath the chamber, to the quiet air that seemed to hold memory instead of dust, to the faint presence of something that had endured without needing to be seen. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the case, not as something finished, but as something ongoing. Then he turned his attention to the rest of the room, walking slower now, not searching, but observing, understanding. The containers were no longer just objects. They were pieces of a larger story, one that had been written over years. Protected through silence, he noticed subtle details he had missed before, small markings on the walls that aligned with the dates on the cases, faint grooves in the floor that guided the pattern of the room. Everything connected, nothing wasted. Even the hum had layers, a deeper tone beneath the surface rhythm, like a second voice echoing the first. He stopped near the far wall where a narrow panel blended almost seamlessly into the structure. Easy to miss unless one was looking for it. Rex shifted above again, a soft scrape of paws against the edge of the opening, and then a single quiet tap. Not urgent, not warning, just a signal. Ethan turned toward the sound, then back to the panel. Understanding passing between them without words, he placed his hand against the surface and felt it immediately, warmer than the surrounding metal, alive with that same measured pulse. But this time it was different. The rhythm was slightly altered, extended, as if inviting something more. Ethan hesitated only briefly before matching it, tapping once, twice, pausing longer than before. Then again, the panel responded with a soft release, sliding open just a few inches, revealing a narrow compartment inside, and within it, a set of keys, old but polished, each one tagged with small engravings that matched the markings on the containers behind him. Not replacements, not backups, but access. Ethan lifted them slowly, the metal cool against his skin despite the warmth of the chamber. And as he did, the hum shifted once more, not louder, but fuller, like a system acknowledging a transition. Above, Rex exhaled, a long, steady breath that carried down into the space like a quiet reassurance. Ethan closed his hand around the keys and looked back across the chamber, seeing it now not as something hidden beneath the world, but as something that had been waiting for its next keeper, not someone to take it, but someone to continue it. And in that stillness, surrounded by quiet purpose and patient design, he realized that what his uncle had left behind was not just protected wealth, it was responsibility, and somehow, without announcement, without ceremony, that responsibility had already begun to settle into his hands. The keys rested in Ethan's palm with a quiet weight that felt older than the metal itself. And for a moment, he simply stood there, letting the rhythm of the chamber settle into him, no longer something separate, but something he could feel without effort, like a second heartbeat aligning with his own. He moved back toward the rows of containers, slower now, more deliberate, each step guided not by curiosity, but by a growing sense of understanding. The engravings on the keys matched the markings on the cases with exact precision, not decorative, not symbolic, but functional, a system built with patience and intention. He stopped at the first container marked with a simple set of initials and a year that stretched back further than he expected. The metal surface warm beneath his fingers, the hum shifting slightly as he brought the key closer. Almost as if it recognized what was about to happen, Ethan inserted the key and turned it gently. There was no resistance, only a soft internal movement, smooth and quiet, like something that had never been forced. The lid lifted slowly, revealing not just gold this time, but a collection of documents bound carefully together, maps, ledgers, records that told a story of movement across years and places, not chaotic, not hidden in fear, but organized, preserved, protected. He flipped through one page, then another, each line written with clarity and purpose. This was not a forgotten fortune. It was a managed one, maintained through time by someone who understood that value was not just what you had, but how you kept it. The hum beneath the chamber deepened again, not louder, but more present, as if acknowledging each step he took, each piece he uncovered. Above him Rex shifted once more, a faint scrape followed by a soft exhale, steady and calm. Ethan glanced upward briefly, then back down, the connection between them unspoken but constant. He moved to another container, selecting a different key, repeating the process, each opening revealing something new, gold. Documents, small sealed packages, all arranged with the same careful intention, nothing rushed, nothing random. The system was not just storing wealth, it was guiding its discovery, teaching through pattern and patience. And with each container, Ethan felt something change inside him, the hesitation fading, replaced by a quiet confidence that did not come from ownership, but from understanding. He was no longer just someone who had found something hidden. He was someone who was learning how it worked and why it had been built this way. He paused in the center of the chamber, keys still in hand, the hum steady around him, the air warm and still, and in that moment he realized that the true weight of what he had inherited was not in the gold or the documents, but in the system itself, a system that did not reveal everything at once, but trusted the one who followed its rhythm to uncover it piece by piece. And as the chamber continued its quiet pulse beneath him, Ethan understood that this was only the beginning, not of what he had found, but of what he was meant to become. The chamber no longer felt hidden, it felt awake, and Ethan stood in the center of it with the keys resting in his hand, listening as the rhythm beneath the floor shifted again, not repeating this time, but evolving, stretching into a new pattern that carried a subtle urgency, not danger, but direction. He turned slowly, following the change in the hum, noticing how certain sections of the wall seemed to respond more strongly, how the air moved differently near one corner, warmer, almost like a current flowing through unseen channels. Rex let out a soft sound from above, a low breath that carried a slight tension now, not fear, but focus, and Ethan understood immediately that something was changing, not in a way that threatened, but in a way that required attention. He moved toward the far side of the chamber where the hum gathered into a deeper tone, the wall there marked with faint lines that had been invisible before, now subtly illuminated by the same soft glow that filled the space. He placed his hand against it and felt the difference. The pulse here was faster, not by much, but enough to break the original pattern. As if the system was asking a new question, Ethan stepped back slightly, watching, listening, letting the rhythm settle into something he could follow. He remembered the sequence, the patience it required, the way nothing here responded to force, only to understanding. He lifted one of the keys, hesitating for a brief moment before selecting the one that matched the faint marking on the wall. The metal warmed instantly in his hand, not hot, but responsive, as if it recognized the alignment. He pressed it gently into a narrow slot that appeared as the surface shifted, almost imperceptibly. And then he waited, not moving, not rushing. The hum deepened, the air thickened slightly, and then the wall responded, not opening all at once, but sliding apart in sections, revealing a narrow passage beyond, the light within softer, more distant, the space extending further than he had expected, not just a chamber, but a continuation, a path. Ethan felt something steady inside his chest, not surprise, not disbelief, but acceptance, as if this next step had always been part of the design. Rex shifted again above, a single paw scrape followed by stillness. Watching, trusting, Ethan stepped forward into the passage, the floor beneath him smooth and warm, the hum guiding him deeper, each step revealing more of what had been hidden, not by accident, but by intention. And as the chamber behind him settled back into quiet, the system did not close him out. It moved with him, adapting, continuing, as if the moment he chose to follow it, he had become part of it. And somewhere in that steady, evolving rhythm, Ethan realized that this place was never meant to be fully revealed at once. It was meant to unfold, one step at a time. For the one willing to keep walking, the passage narrowed as Ethan moved forward, the air growing warmer with each step, not suffocating, but steady, controlled, like a place designed to hold time and balance. The light along the walls shifted subtly as he passed, not flickering, but adjusting, responding to his movement as if it had been waiting for someone to walk this exact path. The hum followed him, no longer distant or surrounding, but guiding, rising slightly ahead and softening behind, like a current pulling him deeper into something that was no longer hidden, but unfolding. He reached a wider section where the passage opened into another chamber, smaller than the first, but far more precise. The walls here smoother, the surfaces cleaner, as if this part had been maintained more recently, or perhaps more carefully. In the center stood a long table, metal and wood combined, its surface marked with maps, not folded or stored, but laid out in a way that suggested ongoing work. Ethan stepped closer, his breath slow and even, the beam of his flashlight now unnecessary as the soft ambient light filled the room. The maps stretched across regions, marked with routes, coordinates, small notes written in the same steady hand he had seen in the letter. His uncle had not only built something beneath the lodge, he had continued it, tracked it, expanded it over time. This was not the end of a system. It was the center of one. Ethan ran his fingers lightly over one of the maps, feeling the slight indentation of ink pressed into paper, real, deliberate, alive with intention. The hum shifted again, drawing his attention to the far side of the table where a small device rested, simple in appearance, almost overlooked, a panel with a single narrow slot and a series of faint markings that mirrored the engravings on the keys. Ethan held the keys tighter for a moment, then stepped forward, selecting one carefully, not guessing, but recognizing. The alignment felt clear now, like following a rhythm he no longer had to think about. He inserted the key and paused, waiting. The air seemed to hold still around him, the hum deepening slightly. Then the panel responded with a soft, internal movement. A section of the table shifted, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the maps. Inside was not gold, not documents, but something simpler, a small stack of envelopes, each labeled with a location and a date that extended into the future, not the past. Ethan stared at them for a moment, the meaning settling slowly. This was not just a record of what had been. It was a plan for what would come next. His uncle had not finished this work. He had passed it on, not through words alone, but through structure, through design, through a system that guided without forcing. Ethan picked up one of the envelopes, feeling its weight, its purpose, and in that quiet moment, surrounded by maps that stretched beyond the mountain, beyond the snow, beyond the life he had known before this day, he understood that the fortune beneath the lodge was only a part of what he had inherited. The greater part was the path itself, and now, standing at the center of it, he was no longer just uncovering something hidden. He was stepping into something that was still moving forward. The envelope felt different from everything else Ethan had touched, lighter, but carrying a weight that settled deeper than metal or paper ever could. And for a long moment he did not open it. He simply held it, listening to the quiet hum that now seemed to wait with him, no longer guiding, no longer pushing, but allowing, as if this choice was his alone. Above him the faint presence of Rex remained steady, a quiet reminder that he had not reached this place by accident. Ethan finally slid his finger beneath the seal and opened the envelope carefully, unfolding the single sheet inside. The handwriting was the same, calm and deliberate, but the words were different this time. They were not instructions, not explanations, but something closer to a reflection. His uncle wrote about the idea of continuation, about how systems built on control eventually fail, but systems built on trust can last longer than the people who create them. Ethan read slowly, each line settling into him with a clarity that did not need to be forced. The letter spoke of the maps, of the routes, of the locations marked not as places to take from, but as places to protect, to maintain balance, to ensure that what had been gathered over time would not be lost or misused. The fortune was never meant to sit still. It was meant to move, to adapt, to support where it was needed without drawing attention. Ethan lowered the paper slightly, his breath steady, the meaning unfolding beyond the words themselves. This was not inheritance in the way people in town had imagined. It was not ownership, it was stewardship. The hum beneath the chamber shifted again, softer now, almost like a quiet agreement, and Ethan realized that nothing here had been left unfinished. It had simply been waiting for someone willing to see it through. He looked back at the table, at the maps stretching outward, at the envelopes marked with future dates, and he understood that each one represented a step, not just a destination, but a decision, a chance to carry forward something built with patience and care. Rex shifted above once more, a single soft movement, and Ethan felt it, that same quiet connection that had guided him from the moment they arrived. He folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope, not as something completed, but as something he would return to. Then he reached for one of the marked envelopes on the table, his hand steady, his mind clear, and as his fingers closed around it, the hum in the chamber settled into a new rhythm, not asking, not directing, but acknowledging. And in that stillness, surrounded by the quiet structure of something far larger than himself, Ethan understood that the greatest part of what he had found was not hidden beneath the mountain. It was the path that now lay ahead of him, waiting to be followed with the same patience and understanding that had brought him here in the first place. The envelope in Ethan's hand felt steady, grounded, as if it carried not just direction, but a quiet certainty. And he stood there for a moment longer, letting the rhythm of the chamber settle fully into him. No longer something he followed, but something that now moved with him. He turned away from the table slowly, his eyes tracing the maps one last time, the lines stretching across states, across distances measured in miles and years, each mark no longer abstract but alive with meaning. The system was not asking him to take it all at once. It was offering him a beginning. Rex let out a soft breath above, a familiar sound now, steady and calm, and Ethan understood it as he had begun to understand everything else here, not as a signal of urgency, but of readiness. He walked back through the narrow passage, the walls glowing faintly as he passed, the hum shifting behind him, not fading, but settling, like something returning to rest after being seen. When he stepped back into the main chamber, the air felt warmer than before, or perhaps he simply noticed it differently now. The containers remained exactly as they had been, untouched, patient, as if nothing here needed to change to prove its value. Ethan paused at the central structure, placing his hand lightly against its surface once more, the pulse beneath it steady, familiar, no longer mysterious. He tapped it once, twice, paused, then again. The same rhythm that had opened the path before, and the structure responded with a soft acknowledgement, the lid lowering slowly, sealing the chamber not as something hidden again, but as something preserved. Waiting for the next moment it would be needed, he moved toward the ladder, the keys still in his pocket, the envelope held firmly in his hand, and began to climb, each step upward carrying him back toward the cold world above, the warmth fading gradually, the air thinning, the hum softening until it became something he could no longer hear, but still somehow feel. When he reached the top, Rex was there immediately, stepping close, his presence solid and real against Ethan's side, the dog's amber eyes calm, knowing. Ethan placed a hand on his neck briefly, grounding himself in that quiet loyalty. Then he pushed the metal plate, closed behind him, covering the opening once more, the snow already beginning to drift lightly across the surface as if the mountain itself was restoring the silence. He stood there for a moment, looking out across the white expanse, the lodge behind him, the world exactly as it had been, unchanged to anyone who could not see beyond it. But for Ethan, everything had shifted, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that settled quietly into his path forward. He looked down at the envelope again, then toward the distant tree line where the mountain faded into miles of untouched land, and without hesitation, he turned, knowing that what waited ahead was not something to be found all at once, but something to be followed, one step at a time, just as it had always been meant to be. The wind moved gently across the mountain as Ethan stood outside the lodge, the snow shifting in soft patterns around his boots, the kind of quiet that once felt empty now carrying a different weight, something steadier, something earned. Rex stood beside him, still and watchful, his ears flicking toward the distant tree line, as if listening to something far beyond the ridge. Ethan slipped the envelope into his jacket, his hand lingering there for a moment, feeling its presence like a compass rather than a possession. The lodge behind him remained unchanged, weathered wood, dark windows, a place the town would still laugh at if they saw it now, but he no longer saw it the way they did. He saw it as a threshold, not an ending, not a prize, but a beginning that had waited longer than anyone realized. He walked a few steps forward, boots pressing into the snow, the air cold against his face, but it no longer felt harsh. It felt clear, like the world had been stripped down to something honest. Rex moved with him, not leading, not following, but staying exactly at his side, the quiet partnership that had carried them through everything now settling into something deeper, something understood without words. Ethan paused at the edge of the slope, looking out across the valley where the land stretched for miles, untouched and silent, the kind of place where stories did not announce themselves. They revealed themselves slowly to those willing to listen. He thought about the maps, the routes, the envelopes waiting beneath the mountain, each one a step forward, not toward wealth alone, but toward something larger, something that required patience, judgment, and a kind of quiet faith. He exhaled slowly, watching his breath fade into the cold air, and for the first time in a long while, there was no weight pressing down on him from the past, no noise pulling him backward, only the steady presence of what lay ahead. Rex lifted his head slightly, eyes focused on the distance, then glanced at Ethan briefly, as if asking without asking, and Ethan gave a small nod, not to the dog, but to the path itself. He turned away from the lodge without looking back, his steps firm, unhurried, each one carrying him forward into something that no longer felt uncertain. The mountain behind him returned to its silence, the snow settling gently over what it protected, not hiding it, but keeping it safe, waiting, just as it always had. And as Ethan and Rex moved into the open land, the world did not change around them, but something within it had shifted, something quiet and unseen, the kind of change that does not need to be noticed to matter. Because sometimes the greatest things are not found in what is uncovered, but in what is carried forward, one step at a time, by those who choose to keep listening.